Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Charlie Mike series. I am thrilled to introduce Adam from Parrot Surety Services, and he will be presenting a four-part series on surety bonds. And Parrot Surety Services works across all 50 states. And so, Adam, what are we going to be learning about today?
Yeah, so thanks, Marie. Thank you for having me and Parrot Surety Services here today. This first episode is just going to be about surety bonds, what they are, why they're required, and the different types of surety bonds that are out there. This episode is aiming to not just concentrate on contract bonding, but more or less go over the other kinds of bonds that are out there.
So everything I need to know at a very high level about bonding and why I may or may not need them kind of thing is kind of what you'll be giving me a good overview today then.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, well, Adam, I'm going to turn this over to you and I'm going to go into stealth mode. So I'm going to go off camera and then also mute. And so I'm going to have you share your screen and we will take it away and I'll have you take it away from here.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this first episode about surety bonds, a beginner's bonding bonanza. So if any of you are familiar with surety bonds, you've had to use surety bonds before, you're a contractor who uses contract bonds, you know that figuring out bonding is the key to government contracting. Usually this is the bottleneck for most government contractors. If you figure out bonding, there's a good chance if you're growing your bonding, you're also growing your wealth, you're profitable, and you're doing well in your business. So my name's Adam Milliren. As Marie said, I'm the owner, surety bond specialist at Parrot Surety Services. My wife and I run this agency. My wife came from the underwriting side of things. She was an underwriter for over 15 years before we started the agency. So we help lots of other agents and their clients get surety bonds in hard to place situations. And I myself run our retail side where I work with mostly veteran-owned businesses to help them establish, grow, or maximize their surety bonding. As we discussed before, we're going to be talking about surety bonds today, what they are, why they're required, and the different types of bonds that are out there. So starting with, what is a surety bond? So a surety bond is a three-party agreement where the surety company is brought in to financially guarantee a contract, regulation, legal decisions, and things like that. These circumstances are generally set forth and when a public contract is being let to bid during licensing and permitting processes, and family law or litigation and other circumstances. The principle that we know, the first party of the agreement, we know them usually as the contractor, but this can be any individual or business who needs a bond. Usually they come to me like, why do I need this bond? At the end of the day, they're the ones purchasing it and they have some sort of duty to perform to the benefit of the obligee. The obligee is the entity requiring the bond. This could be a prime contractor requiring a bond back from a subcontractor. This could be an individual on a private project. But usually we see this as the federal government, state government, or a municipality, some sort of government agency that is trying to get some sort of protection for taxpayers, taxpayer dollars, something like that. The surety is the third party in the situation. This is the company that actually underwrites the principal, underwrites the bond, and guarantees to the obligee that the principal will fulfill their contractual obligations or other obligations. So we have the obligee, we have statutes or maybe a project that they want that they're going to let for a bid. The principal, the contractor sees this job as part of that agreement with the obligee that they're going to do the job or get their license or whatever. The obligee wants a form of insurance. So this is where surety really kind of gets their ground in the insurance world. It's actually a credit product, but it's in the insurance world because it's insurance for the obligee, not the person actually getting the bond. So this is where the surety steps in. The principal applies to the surety underwrites the principal. They say, yes, we'll partner with you. We'll financially back this bond for you, and we'll provide this bond to the obligee. So that's kind of how that situation works out. It's a three-party agreement. That's all we got to know for now. So what is the actual purpose of a surety bond? It's a financial protection for the obligee. It guarantees to the obligee that the principal will fulfill whatever they say they're going to do. If the principal does not do that, there can be a claim on the bond, at which time the surety will step in and either pay the obligee for losses up to that amount of the bond, or there's other remedies in any types of claim situation that we'll go over. And I have a few other examples on the slide that we're going to go into. So the main one, how most of us know about surety bonds is contract. So a contractor is building a library in the city of Orlando. They won the bid. They provided their bond. They're halfway through the project. They become insolvent. They're declaring bankruptcy. But the city of Orlando now has a half-built library. So what are they going to do? They make a claim on the bond. The surety steps in. They either pay the remainder of the contract to the obligee, or they go out and find another contractor to finish the job, or they potentially could also fund XYZ constructors out of bankruptcy so they can finish the job. Another bonding situation. Sydney's dad passes away. She's the executor of his estate, named in the will. The court is requiring her to obtain an executor bond. So this bond just ensures that Sydney will do the right thing with all of her dad's things and give them out as the will says. If she doesn't, the parties who have been wrong can make a claim on the bond and get what was rightfully theirs, essentially. And then the last situation, this is a licensing and permitting situation for a sand and gravel supplier in Montana. They're wanting to open a new sand and gravel mine, and in that permitting process to get approval to open the mine with the Department of Environmental Quality in Montana, they have to obtain a surety bond that just guarantees that the mine land is returned to some sort of pre-planned or original state. They're sloping the sides so it's not the sides of the mine so it's not dangerous for wildlife or children that are trespassing. They revegetate it to grow the plants that were there before they disturbed the earth and to prevent erosion. This all is often outlined in another piece of the permitting process in the reclamation plan, and is also usually required to underwrite the bond. So why are surety bonds required? Today, it's pretty simple, the Miller Act, but I'm going to take a step back and look at the history of surety bonds when they first started, clear back in 2750 BC in Mesopotamia. The first known surety arrangement was when it was an arrangement between two farmers. One farmer was sent to serve in the army, and he made a deal with another farmer who agreed to take care of his fields, and a local merchant agreed to guarantee that the second farmer would uphold this agreement. So that was the first known one. And then in the Code of Hammurabi, there is something written about a type of fidelity bond that was sold to the masters of servants. So if servants working on a property stole something or wronged their master in some way that was guaranteed under that agreement, then they would be compensated for that. Jumping way up to the 17th century, I'm sure most of us have heard of Lloyd's of London. This is where the term underwriter actually comes from. So Lloyd's Coffee House was a coffee shop in the harbor of London where all of the people who worked in the harbor would come and get their coffee and stuff like that. And there was a blackboard on the wall where Lloyd would write the names of ships, captains, and the goods that they were being shipped out from London. And individuals would come into the coffee shop and they would write their name under the ship's name to underwrite the shipment that was going out. So if anything happened while those goods were at sea and they ended up at the bottom of the ocean, those costs were covered by this, what we call an individual surety. So individuals guaranteeing the shipment of goods. Further on, 18th, 19th century, this is where we see the rise of the corporate sureties in both Europe and the United States. This is following the Civil War when commerce and industry was developing rapidly. We had way more sophisticated commercial law, and corporate sureties were seen as more stable and permanent than individual sureties. And I mean, this is where we are today. We still have corporate sureties handling pretty much everything in the surety world. So, and then in 1894 is where we see the Hurd Act come into play. This just guaranteed the performance of projects. And later on in 1935, the Miller Act was enacted as a federal law to also guarantee the payment piece. So the payment piece is the piece that I like a lot because the payment piece guarantees payment to subcontractors and suppliers. Any projects today over $150,000 using federal funds require performance and payment bonds in the bidding process. And these bonds protect the interests of the federal government, taxpayers, as well as those specialty contractors and suppliers. So the different types of surety bonds, just know that there are over 30,000 different bond forms in the United States. Many of these bond forms cover the same types of bonds, but it can be a lot to juggle between all of the municipalities, states, and the different federal agencies that have their own bonds kind of for the same thing. But there's kind of like two ways that we can look at the types of bonds. There's either contract or non-contract. Contract bonds, they guarantee performance of public and private contracts, construction contracts usually. And then non-contract bonds involve all other situations in which sureties guarantee performance of obligations that generally do not arise from contracts. And then the other way we can kind of look at surety bonds in black and white is statutory and non-statutory. So statutory bonds, they're usually prescribed by municipal ordinance or federal, state regulation, or statute. There's underlying laws that specify the conditions of the bond, is the key point to know there. And where these bonds come from, most of our commercial bonds will come from statute, actually all of them. And then non-statutory bonds are used in the private sector, and these are always backed by a contract, and the bond provisions are within that contract. So the contract bonds, there's only a few of those: bid, performance and payment, supply. We'll go over those on the next one. That's what we know. That used to be about 80% of the surety world up until recently. We're seeing more and more commercial bonds being required, and now contract bonds only make up actually about 60% of the surety market. So commercial bonds are being used more and more, especially in licensing and permitting processes. We use commercial bonds for subdivisions, and public officials who serve the public in a few different ways may also be required to post a bond to guarantee that they're doing the right thing. And then there's also miscellaneous bonds that are used in court cases, family law, and then also fidelity bonds. Contract bonds. So diving a little deeper on these bid, PMP, and supply bonds, maintenance bonds. Contract bonds, as I mentioned, are required for federal projects over $150,000. Most states have similar or equal thresholds. I think there's 18 states that do not. But if federal funds, especially with this new infrastructure or recent infrastructure bill, if federal funds are trickled down to the state level, states that do not have Little Miller Acts must comply with the Miller Act. So a bid bond is required whenever there's a solicitation that mentions that, hey, you need a bid bond. The contracting officer makes sure that they are complying with the Miller Act and require a bid bond for the projects. And what the bid bond does is really pre-qualifies the bidder, make sure that bidders are bidding on work that they qualify for. So you go through the full surety underwriting process to get your bid bond. The bid bond is free, but the surety underwriter qualifies the contractor for the scope of work technically and financially, making sure they have the financial wherewithal to work through any problems that they might run into on the project. And so at the end of the day, this just guarantees that, if you bid, that you enter that contract at your bid amount and you're going to get your payment and performance bond. And if you've got an approval on a bid bond from a surety, they should definitely get you your PMP bond as long as your bid spread isn't too crazy. If for some reason you can't get your final bond, then you are liable for that bid spread between your bid and the next bidder. And the surety can cover that, but they will definitely come after you to collect that money back from you as a contractor. So the final bonds, performance and payment bonds are the most common. Sometimes you might only need a performance or a payment. In any case, it's going to cost 100% of the contract amount. A supply bond is a type of performance bond. You're performing the supplying of something. So the performance bond guarantees that you perform the contract according to the plans and specifications. The payment piece guarantees any labor or materials that go into that project. For public land, for publicly owned property, you can't place liens on that. So the payment mechanism, or the payment bond, is the mechanism for subcontractors and suppliers to make a claim and make sure that they get paid if they aren't getting paid by that prime contractor who is bonded on the project. And then lastly, usually there's a maintenance bond included, and that just guarantees that the materials and the workmanship is good and that it's not going to just fall apart, the day after they walk off the job. And usually this is 1 or 2 years. There can be some extra costs if it's more than 1 year, or if the maintenance bond is standalone and you never had to have a bid bond or PMP bond for the project. We see these mostly with subdivision projects, building subdivisions. The contractors most likely to need contract bonds are usually construction related, general contractors, specialty contractors, glazing, striping, earthwork, masonry, HVAC, that kind of stuff. Other people that may need contract bonds: highway mowers, landscapers, suppliers, residential waste haulers, people who pick up your trash. They bid on the right to pick up your trash with usually your local municipality. Environmental remediation contractors who are running around cleaning up all the EPA projects, the Superfund sites. They need contracts that guarantee the performance of the remediation. And then janitorial contractors who do, $150,000 plus projects, or jobs, they'll also need contract bonds. Digging into some commercial bonds here, they're most often required during some sort of licensing, permitting process, or they're guided by statute. So all the license and permit bonds kind of fall into one of these categories. I'm not going to go really any deeper unless there are some on the side here, but compliance, this just essentially is during a licensing or permitting process, you're applying for a contractor license bond. This just ensures that you comply with the regulations. And then in California, and I'm sure some other places, there's a third-party liability. So generally, only the obligee can make a claim on the bond. Sometimes there's this third-party liability where pretty much anyone can make a claim on the bond. And those types of license and permit bonds can be more difficult to get written and usually have higher rates. But specialty brokers such as Parrot can handle stuff like that. And then the next type of bond, tax or fees. So say you have a convenience store, you sell lottery tickets, tobacco, alcohol. You're collecting taxes, additional taxes on behalf of the government, and they want to make sure that you're collecting the correct taxes or fees and that you're reporting them and paying them to the government. This bond guarantees that you're doing the right thing in those situations. For merchandising and dealer type of permit bonds. So if you're an RV dealer, a used car salesman, something like that, that historically has had problems with, lemon cars, stuff like that. Those types of industries generally have required these days now a license and permit bond to guarantee that you're doing the right thing and providing, that right service to the people and you're not trying to mess people over. And then lastly here, reclamation and environmental protection. So if you're doing some kind of business like mining, or you are opening a landfill, or doing some sort of thing that could potentially have harm to the environment, usually there's some sort of bond required to guarantee that if you go out of business, there's a third-party financial guarantor, the surety, who will step in and reclaim that facility, reclaim that mine. Close the landfill, monitor it, if the landfill's leaking, perform any kind of remediation that might need to happen there. Subdivision bonds. So these, some people might say these are contract bonds because anytime a developer builds a subdivision, generally they have to have a subdivision bond. And the bond actually doesn't guarantee the building of the subdivision and the houses, but it guarantees that all of the public infrastructure is to code. You know, they put in mailboxes, the sidewalks are appropriate, the curbing is the right size, they have the sewage in, the water in. And if the developer runs out of money in the middle of the project, that's when the city might make a claim on the bond to get the surety to step in and handle the project to make sure everything comes to code and gets finished out. And then the last one we're covering here are public official bonds. So there's three kind of levels of this. So if you're an administrative official in the government, you might be required to provide a public official bond. These are people who don't handle funds, pretty easily written. For those who do handle public funds, there's going to be some like checks and balances that the surety is going to look into here to make sure nobody can, commit fraud, steal taxpayer dollars. And then the third situation, public officials such as sheriffs or judges who have direct involvement and power in the public. These just kind of are bringing a third party to guarantee that if these people do anything wrong, that the people who are done wrong will be righted. And just so people aren't really abusing power is what this protection is for. Some examples of the bonds here, we see contractor license bond we talked about, reclamation bond we talked about, plugging in abandonment bonds. Those are used in the oil and gas industry. So if you have an oil and gas well, this brings in a third-party financial guarantor. So if you're operating a bunch of wells and you go out of business, there's money there to plug and abandon the wells, so they aren't just left open as a hazard to the general public or any trespassers and whatnot. And then also to protect the environment. Same thing kind of with the post-closure bonds. Those are used for landfills or maybe facilities built on public land. Kind of the same concept with solar decommissioning bonds. So you have a giant field filled with solar panels. They have a useful life of 25, 30 years. At the end of that useful life, there's going to be, some sort of money that needs to be spent to take all that down. And so a bond is required prior to this project beginning that ensures that the money is there to make that happen at the end. Right-of-way bonds, these just are used usually whenever you're creating roads, kind of like on BLM or something, maybe to access a cell phone tower, or you're pulling off of a concrete road onto like dirt with heavy machinery. This just guarantees that, the government is giving you access to this to create like some sort of road, and you're just going to put it back to how it was, or fix, where the heavy machinery is coming on and off the road. You protected that and didn't like destroy the road. So bonds are used in many different situations, especially on the commercial side. They're in place to protect the general public and to make sure that money's there and that we're all doing the right thing at the end of the day. And then so miscellaneous surety bonds. In court, they are used in judgments. Sometimes a plaintiff is suing someone over an item. And if that item or carries a lot of value or something and is given to one person, that person might have to put up a surety bond to guarantee that the other person will get paid if they end up like destroying that item or, don't give it back in its original condition if the courts rule that it was actually the other person. So, in an appeal, same thing. If you're appealing to a higher court, you might need to put a bond out there to secure that process. That's not a bail bond. A bail bond is a type of court bond, but those are generally specialized agencies who only handle bail bonds. We don't do any here, and most surety agencies do not. And then other types of court bonds in family law, if you're a guardian to an incapacitated person, you might need to produce a surety bond that just says that you're going to handle those funds and their estate the right way. Same thing with administrators and executors. We talked about that executor example. If you're the executor of a will, you might need to produce a bond that says you're going to do the right thing. Same thing for bankruptcy proceedings. If you're the trustee and you're taking all of the assets in of a company and you're trusted to disperse those, this just guarantees that you're going to do the right thing with all of those. Fidelity bonds, this is more of a type of insurance and requires an employer-employee relationship. And employers purchase fidelity bonds to cover employee theft or dishonesty. Lost security. So maybe you've lost your car title before, maybe you will sometime in the future. If you go to the DMV, they will get you another car title, but you're going to have to post a bond that guarantees you are the rightful owner of the car. If someone pops up down the road and says, hey, actually, this car is mine, that's when the DMV would make a claim on the bond to pay that person back their money. These can also be used if you lose like a cashier's check. But generally, sureties, if the story doesn't really check out or whatever, sureties will generally require some sort of collateral for that stuff. And lastly, there was an actual financial guarantee that actually guaranteed municipal bonds. So people could purchase the investment product of municipal bonds, and surety bonds were used to guarantee that those people that purchased those bonds would get paid out their interest and then the principal at the end. In the 70s and 80s, this kind of collapsed, and financial guarantee bonds, they're out there and people try to require them, but they're very hard to get written in the surety world. So yeah, that's pretty much all the different types of bonds. I wanted to keep that quick, but still also try to cover the full breadth of surety bonds that are out there. Make sure you tune into the next few episodes of navigating the surety bond application process. And then we'll dig deeper into the important stuff, looking at, how surety underwriters actually underwrite your application. And then further on, once you have your surety bond program, how you can maximize that and grow that efficiently.
Adam, that was amazing. Who knew surety bonds were way, 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 way back when? That was a lot of information and a lot of great insights. That was great. I really liked learning about the uniqueness and kind of the one-offs, especially in the financial realm, and then with remediation and the gas and oil industry as well. Everyone always thinks, construction, and so this is why we wanted to have you on board, so that you could kind of share your pearls of wisdom and background on all things surety bonds. So please make sure everyone to stay tuned for series 2, 3, and 4, which are going to be up and coming here in the very, very near future. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we're going to call this one a wrap.